Welcome back to Kentucky Sports Television. Now, college basketball doesn't kick off for a few more months, but in the summertime, it's always about basketball in Kentucky. We're happy now to be joined by Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News on Skype. Mike, thank you for taking some time to talk with us.
Happy to do so.
Now, of course, this time last year, John Calipari, he said the writers that put his team in the top 5 should be drug tested. And this year he's saying he likes the pressure, that it's a different tune. When you look at this year's team, last year's team, what are the big striking differences that you see?
Well, there are enormous differences. A year ago, it was the best of a bad class. Alex Poitras and Nerlens Noel, Archie Goodwin were high-level players from a fairly poor class. And the lesson that season taught us was that if it's a bad class, even if you're entering a not great season, which last year wasn't overwhelmingly talented, as you see from this draft, if it's a bad class, it's a bad class, and they're not going to make an impact. You see players like Julius Randle. You see players elsewhere like Andrew Wiggins and Jabari Parker. These guys are going to make an impact. These guys are going to make an Anthony Davis, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist level impact. They are great talents. They will make a difference in college basketball. Kentucky just happens to have gathered more difference makers than anybody else, adding in the Harrison twins, as well as James Young and Dakari Johnson. And then secondarily, they have more veteran players who can help. Alex Poitras, Willie Cauley-Stein, those guys can be very, very good college players, and they can show the younger talents that will join them how to do things the right way. They obviously, Willie, I don't think Willie was ever a problem with doing things the wrong way. He just needed to know how good he was. And Alex, I think, learned a little bit about what not to do, and he can teach guys who come in behind him how to do it the right way. And they didn't come back to have another year like this. They came back to have a great year. So they'll put the peer pressure on those younger players to do the right things.
You talk about Willie Cauley-Stein. In his summer press conference, Calipari said that he could become one of the best players that he's ever coached. Do you think that is, Cal says some things sometimes that are slight exaggerations, but are you buying that Cauley-Stein has that potential to be that great?
Well, when you say one of, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be Marcus Camby or Anthony Davis. It means one of. And so you put him in, what is that, the top 10, top 15, top 20 Cal players? You're still at a very high level. And I think that Willie can be a very effective college basketball player, a player who plays a long time in the NBA. And I think the fact that he came back to play as a sophomore is indicative that those are the goals he has, that it's not just about getting in the league and then hanging on to that 12th spot for as long as you can. It's about having a career instead of just getting drafted in the way that Jerry West talks about all the time. Cal has adopted that to some extent. He showed that with the way he handled this group. In the past, he's always encouraged players who were ready to be high lottery picks to go. With this group, he said, look, some of you guys aren't ready to play in the NBA. You were barely ready to play in college. I think that the guys who took that advice, like Willie and like Alex, are going to be rewarded for it.
Now, that NBA age limit rule has become, every summer, of course, is a popular talking point. Calipari today, again, voices displeasure, as he always does, said he'd like to see players stay 2 years. Do you think there's any real chance? Because I feel like there's a lot of talk about it, but this is working for the NBA enough that rule may not change. Do you think we'll ever see a change in that age limit rule from the NBA?
I think a couple of things will make a difference. First of all, if it was going to happen easily, it would have happened. It would have been sort of shoehorned into that last collective bargaining agreement when the NBA had its last lockout, and it didn't quite work out that way. They decided to study it. Well, now the NBA Players Association has had some leadership tumult, so we haven't really been able to get them focused on something like this. But you keep having drafts like this. Obviously next year we're going to have a very good draft, but this is the second substandard draft in a row. If the NBA teams are content to continue to populate their league with below average NBA prospects, pretty soon they're not going to have a very good league. That was the reason they got into the age limit business in the first place, because they were getting too many Gerald Greens, too many Eddie Currys, too many Andy Ebies who were failing and not getting enough production out of the majority of their high school to NBA players. So they need to address making a change. We'll see what the next person who's put in charge of the NBA PA decides to do with the age limit. But we're starting to see a reason for it, a critical mass with 2 consecutive drafts that aren't producing NBA level players. Next year we'll interrupt that process, but we could be right back into the same rut 2 years down the road.
Kind of jumping back to something you said earlier about this freshman class coming in the returning guys that are there. The criticism partially last season was some of the veteran players like Kyle Wiltshire did not have the experience, I guess, had not endured negative play in the losing. It couldn't really lead. That wasn't in their nature. Do you see these guys, the Julius Randles, the Aaron Harrison, Andrew Harrisons, as being able to be the vocal leaders in a locker room where it seems like the guys that are there are kind of lead by example, not say a lot kind of guys?
Well, I'm not sure yet that those guys can be leaders because they haven't played at the at the college level. I don't think there's a Michael Kidd-Gilchrist in that group. Michael was a special personality, able to lead as a freshman. I think the leadership has to come from guys like Willie Cauley-Stein. I think it has to be there. Kyle Wiltshire, in terms of his development, I was a little disappointed when I heard John say in his his early summer press conference that Kyle Wiltshire needs to come back with a better body. And my immediate reaction to that was, well, if it was conceivable for him to come back with a better body, why didn't he do it last year? I mean, there was so much potential playing time available for him. He was the only returning starter. Why didn't he get stronger a year ago? I was really puzzled by that. But I still think he's got skill. I still think he has ability. Perhaps playing this summer some for the Canadian national team, or at least trying out if he's not able to make it. At least maybe that process helps him a little bit. But he's got to get serious about the game, serious about his body, if he wants to have any sort of leadership or even a role on this team next season.
In the international basketball has become kind of a big piece of what's going on in Lexington over the last couple of summers. You have a great article up now on Sporting News about Coach K, how Duke's program has risen as he's with Team USA. Coach Cal has stepped down as the coach of the Dominican national team. This week, they're expected to announce Orlando Antigua will be the head coach. Fans around Kentucky, I think for the last couple of seasons, have kind of thought that Coach O was close to getting a head coaching job somewhere. Do you think that he's prepared and he's on the cusp maybe in the next year or two of really being considered for a head coaching job somewhere?
I go way back with Orlando Antigua, all the way to his high school days at St. Raymond's in the Bronx when I interviewed him. I was covering college basketball for the Pittsburgh Press when he was a prospect and signed at Pitt. And then I actually covered him in a game at Rupp where he helped destroy a very good Kentucky team that was on its way to the Elite Eight eventually and took them out of the preseason NIT. So like I said, go way back with Orlando. One of my favorite people in basketball, great personality, great enthusiasm. He's going to be a very, very good college head coach. And I think the experience of coaching the Dominican national team will help him. He'll be able to, before he gets a real head job, he'll be able to show how he runs a game. The games at the FIBA level are very sophisticated. 24-second clock. He's going to be coaching NBA level players, presuming they all return, like Al Horford. So I think it's a great experience for him. I'm very excited about that prospect for Orlando. Again, like I said, one of my favorite people in basketball, bar none. He will deserve a chance to coach at the college level very soon.
Before we let you go, the SEC last year was very bad for good portions, pretty much the whole season. When you look at the conference this year, Kentucky will be back, it looks like. Florida has another great class coming in. How good can the conference be overall this season?
Well, I think it can be better than last year because Kentucky won't be the disaster that it was a year ago. It will be the exact opposite of that. You're talking about perhaps the number one team in the country. Florida is a top 10 level team. We think Ole Miss can be good again. Alabama should make some progress. It's still, I don't think we're going to see a huge breakthrough in terms of the SEC, but it'll be better. But I'm mystified by why we're not seeing more progress at some of the programs around the league, why Alabama hasn't been able to make more of a jump forward, why we haven't been able to see Arkansas get better. No traction at all in a league where there seems to be so much opportunity. One or two teams could step up, jump up, and really make a difference for themselves, and they haven't been able to do it. So I think there'll be a better league, but it still won't be one of the elite leagues next season. They will have 2 of the elite teams.
It cannot get worse. We know that. Mike DeCourcy, Sporting News, thank you so much. Always a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.